Hi everybody, I'm Steve, and I just spent the last 5 days in the hospital, in bed pretty much the entire time. I was discharged yesterday afternoon, so this is my first day at home. First day really up and about, walking around, and kind of dizzy, lightheaded. I actually feel really good. Considering what I went through over the past 5 days, I feel fantastic. So my visit to the hospital was completely unexpected. Well, maybe not completely unexpected, but it wasn't planned. It was kind of out of the blue. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I love to walk, and I typically walk about 5 miles a day. Sometimes I even walk, 10 miles a day or further. And I've made quite a few videos on this channel where I walk for an hour, 2 hours, even 3 hours and film it. So I love to walk. I've never had an issue walking at all my entire life, and I think of myself as being pretty healthy. I eat almost no meat and almost nothing that most people would consider bad. My one weakness is sweets and ice cream, and so I have overindulged in ice cream over the years. But other than that, I have a pretty healthy diet most of the time. So all of this kind of came as a shock to me when about 3 weeks ago, well, let me back up just a little bit. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I had COVID really, really bad about 6 weeks ago. And for 3 weeks, I could hardly get out of bed. I could hardly walk at all. And for over a month, I could hardly walk at all. My lungs just felt awful, and they really, really hurt whenever I would try to walk. So I wasn't able to walk very much for almost a month. And then it was August in Palm Springs, the desert, and we've had one of the hottest years on record. And so in the mornings when I normally walk right before sunrise. Well, temperatures were 90 to 100 degrees before the sun came up. So I wasn't really taking really long walks and filming them like I was back in the spring and the winter. And then about 3 weeks ago, I was taking my normal walk. It was a nice day. It wasn't too hot or anything. And I was about a mile or so into my walk when I started getting really, really intense chest pains. It felt like, they say, I've heard over the years, I'm sure you probably have too, that sometimes when you're having a heart attack, it can feel like there's an elephant sitting on your chest or standing on your chest. And that's exactly what it felt like. And it just came on like that during my walk, and I had shortness of breath. I mean, I could really hardly catch my breath at all. I could hardly breathe. I broke out in a cold sweat. I thought I was going to faint. I mean, I felt really dizzy and clammy and like I was just going to pass out. So of course I stopped, and the pain went away a little bit, subsided. After a few minutes, I thought, well, maybe it's just heartburn, acid reflux, which I tend to get. It's never caused me these kind of pains before, but I have read that acid reflux and heart attacks can sometimes have very similar symptoms. So I thought, well, it must be that. I mean, I can't be having a heart attack as healthy as I am. I thought, well, let me just try to walk home. So I just continued very, very slowly. It took me about a half hour to get back home. And as soon as I got back home and I sat down, I felt fine. I felt like nothing had happened. And so I thought, well, it must be heartburn. Or I thought, well, maybe I was having a panic attack or something. I had had a panic attack back in my 20s, and I remember it felt like I was dying. If any of you have had a panic attack, I'm sure you can probably relate. And so I thought, well, maybe it's that. I don't know what I would have to have a panic attack about. I'm retired and happy and relaxed and nothing to panic about. But, I think panic attacks are not really rational, and you can have them for no particular reason, I think. So I just thought, well, it must be something like that. Or I thought also, since I had COVID so bad just a couple weeks earlier, I thought, well, maybe COVID has just really affected my lungs, and maybe it's not my heart, even though the pressure and the pain was right in the very center of my chest, kind of in the same area where your lungs are. So I thought, well, maybe it's not my heart, maybe it's my lungs, and maybe I'm just still reacting to COVID. So I thought, well, let me just see how I feel. But I felt fine, like nothing had happened. So it didn't really seem like something that I should make a trip to the ER over, especially since I felt fine. So the next day I thought, well, let me walk a little bit slower and closer to home just in case and see what happens. And I think the next day I did feel kind of the similar thing, but got home and felt fine again. And so I didn't think too much of it. And then over the next week or so, I continued to walk slowly and closer to home, just in case. And a couple of days I didn't feel anything at all. So I thought, okay, maybe it's just the heartburn or whatever. But then this past week, I started getting the pain just by walking about a block. Where before I was walking maybe half a mile to a mile before I would get any pain at all. Well, here I was walking just around the block, and I was getting the same pain. So I thought, okay, this doesn't seem right. And finally, the day I went to the ER, I decided not to walk. I thought, well, let me just work in the yard a little bit. I needed to trim some bushes and pull some weeds and things. And after doing that for about 10, 15 minutes, I got the pains again without even walking. So I thought, okay, and it was pretty intense. So I thought, okay, I need to go to the ER and just check it out and just see what's going on. And so I drove myself to the ER because I'm feeling fine, when I'm not exerting myself or exercising. And I got to the ER, I went in, explained what was happening and the shortness of breath and everything. And they said they did some tests. I think they did an EKG and didn't show anything because I was just sitting there in the ER or laying there in the ER bed, and the results were fine, perfectly normal. So I thought they were just going to send me home. But they said, the ER doctor said, because you're having the shortness of breath with this, and this has been going on now for a few weeks, we really would like to admit you and do some more tests just to rule anything out, just to make sure it's not something serious. So I said, that's fine. And I wasn't expecting to stay in the ER. In fact, the doctor made it sound like they would take me to a room, they would do some tests, and then if nothing was, if they didn't find anything, then I would be out that day. And that's what I was expecting. But then they admitted me. It took most of the day just to admit me. So they said, no, you're definitely staying overnight. We'll do the test in the morning. By the second day, they did tests. And they did all of the tests. I think there were just a certain number of tests you can do to see if you're having a heart attack or if you're having... Well, that first day they actually did. There's a blood test you can do that there's some kind of markers, I guess, if you've had a heart attack, that it shows in your blood. And I didn't have any of those markers, so I didn't have a heart attack. And I thought, well, that's good. That's really good news. But by the next day, they said, okay, now we're going to do all the tests to see if you have any blockages. And so most of the day was spent doing those tests. So at this point, I knew I was going to be spending another night, so I had Jim come down. He walked to the hospital. We don't live that far away. And he picked up the car and visited. And the doctor came up at the end of the day after all the tests were done. And he said, your tests look good. They look negative. Looks like you have no problems at all with your heart. They did chest x-rays looking for pneumonia. There was nothing. So it looked like I had a clean bill of health. And I thought, well, this is good. I have no idea why I'm having these pains, but I'm happy, that all these tests are coming back negative and everything is looking so good. But he said, there's one more test that we'd like to do. He goes, I think he said it's the gold standard. It's sometimes, he says, every now and then, even though these tests that they do, they put dye in your veins and your arteries so they can then film it and show apparently it turns a certain color if you do have blockages, and it showed no blockages, at least, on these tests. And he said, the test we want to do is where they stick a camera, a little micro camera up your veins. They either go up through through your wrist or they go up through the groin. And so they actually went up through the wrist the first time, and I guess they send the camera up to your heart and to all the veins and arteries in and around the heart. And they're able to see every single artery and to see if there's any blockage. And he goes, the chance of us finding anything, I think he said 5 to 10%. He said it's really, really low. He said, so there's probably no issues. It's probably going to be a clean bill of health. But just to be safe, we want to do this. And I said, it's fine with me, just to be safe. But he said, if on the off chance we find something, if I'm able to, I can put in a stent. I can, if you have any blockages, I can put in a stent. And I was like, fine, do, whatever you need to do. So you're awake through the whole thing, which is weird. I think it's sort of like a little bit of a twilight sleep. But in the past when I've had the twilight drugs, I don't remember any of it. And I don't remember anything that happened. But with this one, for some reason, I was awake through the whole thing. At least I feel like I was awake through the whole thing because I remember all the things they were saying and everything that was happening. And I even felt a little bit of pressure. And there was one point in my chest where I'm laying there thinking, this is the exact same pressure I was feeling when I was walking. And so I thought they must be doing something, or they maybe I didn't know what was going on. So after he finished the procedure, he said to me, I was still awake, I could still talk and hear everything he was saying. He said, well, the procedure's done, and we actually found 3 blockages in your arteries, extreme blockages. And they were I'm trying to remember, I don't know exactly what he said, but I seem to remember him saying they were in 3 of the most dangerous areas they could be. So he said he was able to put in 3 stents, and he said they found 3 other areas that were also blocked, semi-blocked, but they were, I guess it has to be a certain percentage before they'll put in a stent. So those will just be treated by medication. So they only put in 3 stents. I was like, wow, I mean, I couldn't believe it. The next day, the doctor in the hospital said that the procedure, or somebody told me that the procedure had lasted for 3 hours. And so I must not have been completely awake through all of it, or maybe I forgot some of it, because to me, the procedure seemed like it was about 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half hour. And I think I remember them saying that the procedure was probably going to only take about a half hour, so maybe I just thought it was a half hour. But apparently it took 3 hours. Afterwards, they took me to the ICU unit, and that's where I was for almost 2 days. And when I first got there, I felt awful. I felt like I'd just been run over by a semi-truck. I mean, I really, really felt awful. And I had a lot of pain in my chest. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in the hospital for weeks. They gave me some pain medication, and within a few hours, I think maybe within 4 or 5 hours, I was feeling fine. And I asked the nurse about it, and I thought she said she was going to be giving me pain medication every 3 hours throughout the night. But then the next morning I said to the doctor, I said, thank goodness for the pain medication. I don't think I would have made it through the night. And he said, you didn't have any. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, you had that first dose, which was a very small dose of pain medication, right after I got out of the surgery. And he said, you didn't have any more throughout the rest of the night. You didn't need it. So I was like, wow, that's great. And he said, how do you feel? And I said, I feel fantastic. I feel like I could go home right now. He goes, well, not so fast. I guess after something like that, they need to at least observe you for a day or so just to make sure, and they, monitor everything. And you're taking drugs. Now I'm taking blood thinners and beta blockers. I think they kept saying beta blockers. I think it's for the stent. But yeah, by the next morning, I was feeling fantastic. I felt just like I've always felt, before this happened. And I've been feeling fine since. Now, I got out of the hospital yesterday, so I was in the ICU unit for 2 days, and then they moved me to another room for half a day before I got out, and just because I didn't need to be in the ICU unit anymore. And so I was there about almost 5 full days. Since getting home, I don't feel quite as good as I did in the hospital. I think it's mostly because I've been standing up, where I was laying down for 5 days, and standing up and walking around, I'm a little bit more lightheaded and not feeling as great, but I still feel pretty good. I was always so happy that I had reached 70 years old and I have almost no medications. I was taking a statin. I've been taking a statin for, 15 years, maybe 20 years, for high cholesterol. So I have 6 prescriptions now, including my eye drops. So maybe that's not too bad, especially compared to my mom and all of her friends. But still, that probably makes me feel worse than everything else. I mean, that makes me feel older just now having this laundry list of prescriptions. And apparently you even have to tell your dentist, because I guess when you're on a blood thinner and you go to the dentist, that can cause lots of bleeding when they're cleaning your teeth. So I don't know what they do about that. But anyway, just wanted to give you an update, or just wanted to let you know. And especially for so many of you who over the last couple of months have been asking me, are you ever going to walk again? And why haven't you been walking? And we miss your walks. And well, these are all the reasons why I haven't been walking, and I have a feeling it's going to be a while before I do much more walking. In fact, I'm not really supposed to do any strenuous exercise, walking or anything else, for at least a week, I think 7 to 10 days. So I'm not going to be walking other than just maybe walking around the house, maybe walking around the yard. So it'll be a while before I'll be filming any walks. So I guess now I have 4 doctors. I mean, isn't that crazy? You get old. I mean, when I was younger, I didn't even have a doctor. I think, I don't even know, I don't remember ever having a doctor until maybe I turned 50 or something. So I guess that's good, but Now all of a sudden I have way more doctors than I want. But I'm better to have them than not to have them. All the doctors in the hospital, different doctors would make different rounds. They have a hospital doctor and then doctors that would come in. They all said, after looking at what happened, they said, you are so lucky to even be alive. They said, if you just waited, a little bit longer, you wouldn't be you wouldn't be in the hospital right now, you'd be dead. And so I guess it was that serious. I mean, the blockage I had major blockage on all three of those major arteries. And so being stupid and waiting almost cost me my life, according to all of these doctors. So I feel like an idiot that I didn't go sooner, but I'm glad I finally did go. And I'm still here to make another video. My brother joked yesterday, he said, well, I'm sure you have lots of B-roll from the hospital, for this video, because he figured I would make a video about this. And I said, well, I was so out of it, and I was practically strapped to my bed, hooked up with all kinds of things, and I just wasn't feeling, once I was in the hospital and everything, I realized how serious everything was. I wasn't really even thinking about making a video. I really didn't film anything until the day I was getting out. I was so happy. So I did do a little footage, and I'll share that in this video. Right before, while they were getting ready to discharge me, it took a few hours to do that. So I seem to remember that I filmed a little bit of that, so I'll share that. It was a very good experience. I mean, if you have to go through something like this, I sure hope you have a hospital that's as welcoming and professional and helpful as my hospital is. And this is Desert Regional Medical Center in Palm Springs. So I hope none of you have ever had an experience like this, but if you have, and you feel like sharing with us in the comments section, I would love to read your comments to see how your experience was compared to mine. And one of the things I like so much about this channel is that you guys are so willing to leave comments about your own personal experiences. And so often I'm really inspired by comments that you've all left. So for those of you who are still watching all the way to the end, thanks, and I hope to see you all next time.